පස්සේ අපි විදුලි විසන්ධි කිරීමේ නැති වැඩපිළිවෙලක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න ලෑස්ති කරනවා.
මේක නැති වෙනවා කියනවා පස්වෙනි ඉඳන්. දැන් පස්වෙනි දැන් පවුණානේ.
බොරු කියන එක සීමාවක් නැති වෙලා තියෙනවා. ගෙදර යන්න කරන්ට් එකක් නැහැ.
කරන්ට් එක නැහැ. අදත් මේ 11 කාලේ ගම කීය දෙන්නේ කියලා දන්නේ නැහැ.
තෙල් අර්බුදයක් ගැන කතා වුණා. අත්වල අර්බුදයක් තිබුණේ නැහැ.
අපිට දැනට කිසිම තෙල් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. තෙල් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙන්නේ.
මේ පේනෝනේ පොලිම දැන් සැපයිනේ
මේක අපායක් වෙලා දින අපිට.
ඒක අල්කර අම්මා බලලා මං එල්ලලා මේ ලයිට් කරනවද?
Do you have the fuel that you need, the diesel for your vehicles? Do you have an uninterrupted supply of power? Do you have the required gas for you to cook a meal? Is there really a shortage of these essential goods in the market? This question, we expect a response from those in power. And the response from those in power is that there is no shortage of these goods. There is no crisis in the country. But are we supposed to accept this response on the face of it? Is this truly the reality? Good evening and welcome to Primetime News on TV1. We hope to explore the the answers to these questions as we report so that you can decide. Let's take a look at your top stories for tonight.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Nadun Gamwe Raja to be named a national treasure. President and Prime Minister declares open Sri Lanka's largest cement plant in Hambantota. Crisis is complicated. Basel instructs local government representatives to switch off lampposts until the 31st of March. Fuel and power crises are over. An assurance from the subject minister.
අද මේ මොහොත වෙනකොට අපිට ලැබෙන ආරංචි අනුව හුඟක් තැන්වල තෙල් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. දැන් පෝලින් ටිකක් අඩු වෙලා තියෙනවා.
The ship came, but where is the fuel? People continue to stand in line to purchase fuel. Intervene to seek justice for the victims of the April 21st attacks. The Cardinal's request to the Human Rights Council. Government MP stages protest opposite SJB head office. Hurls eggs at the complex. Russia opens corridors for fleeing Ukrainians.
News First headlines. Main sponsor.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
On to your top story tonight, Nadun Gamwe Raja, the majestic tusker that carried the sacred tooth relic during the annual Kandy Asala Perahara, has died at the age of 69.
Nadun Gamwe Raja was an Indian tusker born in 1953 in Mysore. Nadun Gamwe Raja was a celebrated elephant towering around 10.5 feet in height, the tallest tamed tusker in Sri Lanka. The beautiful pair of tusks, which is about 4 feet long, adds to the majesty of Nadun Gamwe Raja and the fact that this elephant never rides in a vehicle. He was the current main casket bearer of the procession of Asala held in Kandy, Sri Lanka. This magnificent tusker breathed his last while at the residential premises of Dr. Harsha Vijaya. The lay custodian of the temple of the sacred tooth relic, Pradip Nilangadala, also visited the remains of the tusker and paid his final respects. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has advised the Ministry of Buddha Sasana, Religious and Cultural Affairs to name the late ceremonial tusker Nedum Gamui Raja as the national treasure. Further, he had noted to conserve the remains of the tusker for future generations. The President's Media Division said that a team from the National Museum was dispatched to Gampaha, where the remains of the ceremonial tusker are currently placed.
Moving on in more headline-making news tonight, the inauguration of the Lanka Sanstha Cement Corporation, constructed at the Magampura Industrial Zone, was held today under the auspices of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. This facility is the largest cement manufacturing plant in the whole of Sri Lanka.
After unveiling the ceremonial plaque, the President and the Prime Minister engaged in an inspection tour around the facility. The Lanka Sanstha facility, which started its construction activities in March 2020, spreads across 63 acres and saw an investment of $100 million. The total capacity of the plant would be 4 million metric tons per annum and is one of the largest facilities in the whole of South Asia. Accordingly, plans have already been made to release 2.8 million metric tons of cement to the local market as the first phase of the project.
The
youth of Hambantota district who had to undergo various hardships due to the construction activities of this facility are expecting jobs in this facility. Therefore, the chairman of the Board of Investment must give more priority to them when giving out jobs. If not, they will be frustrated.
The President and the Prime Minister also placed the foundation stone for the proposed steel factory at the premises, which will cover 250 acres with an investment of $400 million. The construction activities of the steel plant is scheduled to begin during the latter part of 2024.
Addressing the United Nations Human Rights Council today, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, the Archbishop of Colombo, requested the international community for support into the investigations over the April 21st attacks. The interactive dialogue on the human rights situation in Sri Lanka got underway at the 49th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva today.
The first impression of this massacre was that it was purely the work of a few Islamic extremists. However, subsequent investigations indicate that this massacre was part of a grand political plot. Despite our repeated requests and those of civil organizations pursuing the truth, the incumbent government of Sri Lanka has failed to mete out justice to the victims. Instead of uncovering the truth behind the attack and prosecuting those responsible, there are attempts to harass and intimidate those who clamor for justice. As a result, nearly 3 years after the horrendous crime, we are still in the dark as to what really happened on that Easter Sunday. As this is a case of a serious violation of the fundamental rights of the aggrieved victims, we earnestly call upon the UNHRC and all its member countries to support the continuation of evidence gathering initiated by the Council last year and to devise a means to ensure an impartial investigation to unravel the truth behind the Easter Sunday massacre.
Meanwhile, Samagi Jana Balawegaya MP Harin Fernando requested the international community to support the people of Sri Lanka whose human rights have been threatened.
My parliamentary colleague Ranjit was sentenced as much as 4 years and his civic rights removed and imprisonment for alleged contempt of court, which is not an offence defined in the law, and had no right to appeal. The President has ignored requests, including from International Parliamentary Union, to pardon Ramanayaka so that he could resume his political work. The cries of the victims of the Easter Sunday bombing and the truth and justice continue to be in vain. The non-prosecution and the negligence of high officials give rise to the suspicion that the real brains behind the attacks are being shielded. Instead, the investigator Shania Besekara, dubbed as Sherlock Holmes of Sri Lanka, and senior police officer Ravi Seniratna are being hounded and their lives are in danger. Added to all this, the economic mismanagement, severe shortage of essential items, disruption of electricity supply, long queues of fuel, our soaring cost of living is just of its consequences. As I speak today, the main opposition office also was attacked by a government member. I urge the international community to support people of Sri Lanka whose human rights been threatened than ever before.
We reiterate our concern about the militarization of drug control and treatment in the country and its negative repercussions on human rights as well as individual and public health. A worrying pattern of deaths in custody of persons arrested for drug offences in alleged shootouts with law enforcement or while assisting law enforcement operations have been documented. The lack of investigation into these custodial deaths entrenches impunity and the use of violence by state agencies.
Member countries, including the core group on Sri Lanka, also spoke about the human rights situation in the country.
HRC Resolution 46/1, it will only hinder the promotion and protection of human rights and national reconciliation in Sri Lanka. We call on relevant parties to respect Sri Lanka's sovereignty, political independence, and the path of human rights development of their own choice in light of their national conditions, in constructive dialogue and cooperation, and to stop politicizing human rights issues or using human rights as a pretext to interfere in the internal affairs of Sri Lanka.
We welcome recent releases on bail of Anaf Ajazim and Hijaz Hizbullah as a positive first step. Whilst we acknowledge initial reforms of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, these do not go far enough. We note with concern that minority communities are facing increased marginalisation, with allegations of land grabs in the north and east of the country.
Amnesty remains deeply concerned by the shrinking civic space and urges the government to halt reprisals against critics and perceived critics, including those advocating for justice for the tragic April 2019 bombings. Amnesty continues to call for an immediate moratorium on the use of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which continues to be used to detain hundreds, particularly minorities, for prolonged periods without charge or trial. Repeated attempts to amend the Act have proved futile, including the latest iteration of amendments that fail to address critical gaps in the law to bring it in line with international law.
In another headline-making story, a group including Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian Madura Vithanage hurled eggs at the head office of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya today. Now, this incident occurred while the same group was staging a protest in the area.
A group led by Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian Madura Vithanage staged a protest opposite the head office of the SJB, questioning as to what the opposition had done for the people while they were in power.
Sajid Premadasa and Harsha De Silva are misleading the people when talking to the media, especially after doing nothing when they were in power. So we came here to question what they did. They gave this country in 2019 to us at its lowest point. When we are doing our best to revive the country, they are misleading the people. We will not let it happen. All these people came voluntarily. They suggested that we question them as they are lying to the public. They want to know what these politicians have done to the country while they were in power.
It was reported that eggs were also hurled at the SJB office premises, while placards were posted on the vehicles parked there as well. Correspondent said the protesters expressed their displeasure towards Hirunika Premachandra.
This act has given an opportunity to MP Madhura Vithanage to get a ministerial portfolio. Look at the state of this country. There's a fuel and gas shortage in the country. It's hard to find even a bottle of Panadol syrup for infants from a local pharmacy. The price of goods in the market has skyrocketed. There are power cuts which last for more than 7 hours. How can a people's representative ignore these hardships faced by his own citizens? These supporters are ready to travel in bullock carts amidst a fuel shortage in the country. They are even willing to feed their children with animal feed instead of milk powder. They are not ready to accept the fact that there is a medicine shortage in the country. They are even ready to stay in the dark for hours without power. They are willing to sacrifice many things for the president. Is this the slogan of these supporters? I am urging these people's representatives to stand up with the people during this crisis. If you don't, the citizens of this country will one day attack you and your Podujana Peramuna supporters.
Meanwhile, Athanagala magistrate Tharanga Rajapaksa ordered that the 2 suspects who attacked the convention of the National People's Power with eggs and stones be remanded until the 21st of this month. 2 suspects were produced before the Athanagala magistrates court. They were remanded pending further investigations and the arrest of 14 other suspects. 2 suspects were arrested and handed over to the Nitambua police on 30th of January during an assault on the Gampaha district convention of the National People's Power. The 2 suspects were admitted to the Vatupitivala base hospital by the Nitambua police for treatment and were given police protection. Attorney at law Lal Kumara Peli stated in court today that the B report in the case had been changed on the instructions of the DIG of the Western Province and the Gampaha SSP. He also stated that this is in the notebook of the Nitambua OIC. The plaintiff pointed out that according to the B report, 14 more suspects were to be arrested. The police stated that the investigation into this case has not been completed yet.
The government has taken certain measures to address the power crisis that is prevalent in Sri Lanka. Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa has issued a directive to certain local government members. We'll bring you the details of this story and much more after this short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Primetime News on TV1.
Valuable Finance, best finance company.
Register today for a Zoom workshop on new technology in Sinhala.
Hack the world with cyber techniques on the 10th of March at 3 p.m.
Register via 0777 600 20.
Organized by Slit Institute.
Tech Bus.
Main sponsor.
Slit Knowledge University, challenging convention and redefining education.
Welcome back to the news. Minister Basil Rajapaksa has instructed all heads of local government bodies of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna to turn off street lights from today until the 31st of this month.
In a letter to all heads of local government bodies of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Minister Basil Rajapaksa highlighted that oil prices in the global market are rising sharply, while economists predict that oil prices will continue to rise as well. The letter also reads that the situation is further complicated by the fact that the country's foreign reserve crisis. Minister Basil Rajapaksa said that the best solution to this issue is to use electricity sparingly. He instructed the heads of local government bodies of the SLPP to inform him of possible alternatives to save electricity.
Despite being informed by the Minister of Finance, the new Minister of Energy Gamni Lokuge stated that electricity and the fuel crisis has been resolved.
Most areas do not have the issue pertaining to fuel now. The number of queues have reduced too. A new shipment of fuel has arrived at the port. We are hoping to unload around 28,300 metric tons of fuel today or tomorrow. We will ensure that the general public will have the usual supply of fuel by Thursday. We have already given 6,000 tons of fuel to the Ceylon Electricity Board. I believe that starting from yesterday we will be able to provide an uninterrupted supply of power.
Although the subject minister assured that the power crisis will be resolved by the 5th of this month, power outages of 4.5 hours were reported in several parts of the country today as well.
අපි කරන්ට් එක ණයට ගන්නෙ නැහැ. නිකන් ගන්නෙ නැහැ. ඇයි අපිට මෙහෙම කරන්නේ? අපිම වත් කරගත්ත ආණ්ඩුව අපිට මෙහෙම කරන එක බොහොමම ස්තුතියි.
අපිට දැන් පැය 7ම කරන්ට් එක කපනවා. මේ ආණ්ඩුව මොනවා කරනවද කියලා අපිට තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ. කරන්ට් එක නැහැ. අදත් මේ 11 කාලේ කපා කීයද කියලා දන්නේ නැහැ.
පස්සේ ඉඳන් කරන්ට් එක කපන්නේ නැහැ කිව්වා. දැන් ඔය අදත් කැපුවා. රටේ භාගයම පෝලිං ගාන ගිහලා ගෑස් නැහැ, කිරිපිටි නැහැ, සිමෙන්ති නැහැ, ඔක්කොම නැහැ. ජනාධිපති කෙනෙක් නැහැ, ජාතියම දන්නවා. මිනිස්සු ජාතියම.
A majority of Sri Lanka's farmers, bus workers, school server operators, office transport operators and lorry drivers are among a plethora of other professions forced to wait in line again at filling stations. Some people are waiting in line since last night with the expectation of filling their tanks. In Battigama, a fuel bowser reached the filling station, but the people were enraged as they were refused diesel.
මේක හික්කඩුවට අපු දෙන්න එකක් දී. නෑ මේක කොටස් අයියේ එහෙම මෙතෙන්ට බෑවේ. මගේ බොස් කියනවනම් මට ගහන්න එපා කියලා. ගහන්න බෑ. ඉතින් මාත් යන මොකද මේක මෙරාවේ නාවිද අපි ඕඩ අපි සල්ලි දාලා තියෙන ඕඩ වලට අපි ගන්න. එතකොට මෙතන සිටියා වගේ. මඩ වලින් ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් හාල්ට ඒගොල්ලෝ වගේ ගන්න පුළුවන් ඒක. බැරි හින්දා කතා කරන්නේ මේ. මුංගේ සල්ලි වලට අපි මතක වෙන්න ඕනේ.
Thereafter, the Sri Lanka police intervened to deliver fuel to the people who were in line. In Balangoda, a tense situation broke out when 2 shipments of fuel destined for 2 separate filling stations were moved to only 1 filling station.
ලෝඩ් එකක් එතෙන්ට ලෝඩ් එකක් මට ආවේ. බලංගොඩ සම්පකාර සමිතියේ සෙට් එක ඒ සීල් ටික ඔක්කොම කඩලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ආපු එක ලෝඩ් එකයි මගේ ලෝඩ් එක දෙකම බාන්න මේ ඔක්කොම කඩලා. හරිද? මේවා මංකොල්ල ගෑම්.
This is the diesel queue in Anuradhapuram. Farmers from Dehiyattakandiya have been waiting in line for days at this filling station, anticipating the arrival of a diesel bowser.
ඔය පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉන්න එක බලන්න නැද්ද? බලනවානේ. උන්ට තේරෙන්නේ නැද්ද? එක මැෂින්කාරයෙකුට තෙල් ලිටර 100 ගානේ දවසකට දුන්නා නම් මේ එහෙම එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒට හරියට අම්මා බලලා මම එල්ලෙනවා මේ ලයිට් කනුක. මට විනාශ කරවා කඩේ තියන්නේ නැහැ.
A tense situation broke out at the Denipitiya filling station in Matara.
අපිට ලෑමාසෙ දුවනවා තෙල් ටිකක් නැහැ. ගත්ත කොහමද? අර එක දෙන්නම් මේක දෙන්නම් හොරි අල්ලන්නම් කියලා. දැන් අල්ලන්නේ උන් දෙන්නත් එළියට එලලා ගම්මන් පිළේ විමල් වීරවංශයි. මේ පේනෝනේ පොලිම. දැන් සැපයිනේ. අපි නම් දුන්නේ නැහැ.
The people in Polonnaru are also facing issues due to the fuel shortage. A long queue was experienced this morning in Horana for diesel. This is the situation in Colombo.
මොන හරි දෙයක් වෙන දෙයක් කරගන්න තියෙන අවස්ථාවක් තමයි මේ අපිට නැති වෙන්නේ. මේක නැති වෙනවා කියනවා 5 වෙනිදා ඉඳන්. දැන් 5 වෙනිදා දැන් පහ වුණානේ. දැන් ආයෙ කියන ඕන්න මේ 7ද 8 වෙනිදාද කොහෙද නැති වෙනවා කියලා. එහෙම වෙයිද අනේ මන්දා.
Despite the fact that 3 ships carrying gas are in the sea of Sri Lanka, a severe gas shortage is experienced across the country. A large number of restaurants and bakeries have closed down as they do not have gas.
බොරු කියන එක සීමාවක් නැති වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකද 5 වෙනිදායින් පස්සේ ගෑස් දෙනවා කිව්වා. විදුලිය කපන්නේ නැහැ කිව්වා. ඇත්තටම දැන් ගෑසුත් නැහැ. ගෙදර යන්න කරන්ට් එකක් නැහැ.
This is how all the shops selling gas cylinders were closed down in Nochiagama.
නැති නිසා දැන් අද කෑමෙව්වේ දරලිපේ. මේ කොත්තු රයිස් ගහන තැන මේවා දවස් කිහිපයක් තිස්සේ මේ පාත් එක යන කිසිම හැකියාවක් නැහැ.
People in Kurunegala stood in line hoping that a lorry carrying gas cylinders would arrive. Litrogas said yesterday $16 million has to be paid for the fuel purchase under the long-term tender that the company supplying fuel did not consent to unloading the fuel, even though steps were taken to release $10 million. 2 of the 3 ships that are docked docked off the Sea of Hindered had arrived in the island on the 15th and 22nd of last month. The demurrage to be paid for every day the ship is docked is $4,500. The total demurrage due for the two ships until today adds up to $157,500. Meanwhile, LAF Gas has limited the number of cylinders issued per day to 2,000 due to issues in opening letters of credit for gas purchases. While demurrage is being charged by vessels bringing gas into the country, it is reported that diesel is also being purchased for a higher price from the world market.
The price of a barrel of crude oil stood at $130 this morning. The price has increased. Our initial calculation was to pay $35 million for the fuel vessel, but with the price increase in the market, we have to pay $50 million now. With this fuel price hike in the world market, I think we should take a decision on the local fuel prices after discussing with the fellow members of the government.
Should the people be responsible for these shortcomings? Why was the oil refinery closed? Was it the fault of the people? Was it the people who failed to make arrangements to purchase fuel under long-term tenders? Steps were taken by authorities to purchase diesel from the same company which refused the long-term tender agreement. Isn't this mismanagement? Or did they deliberately create these issues to allow a certain group of people to earn exorbitant profits?
A tense situation emerged today at the Consular Affairs Division of the Foreign Ministry, which is situated at the Selangor Tower, as the electricity of the ministry has been disconnected, halting its activities, resulting in the ministry being unable to service the needs of its visitors. The police were called in to control the situation.
We came all the way from Kandy to get approval on these translations. They told us to come back on Friday, and when we came back on Friday, they gave us a token saying they are not working because they don't have electricity. I came all the way from Kandy again. I left home at 4 AM. I haven't even had breakfast. Now they are saying they are not functioning today as well because they do not have electricity. All of the people here have chits with them. These chits were handed over on Thursday. For how long are they going to close down services because of their internal issues? We came on Friday. They didn't function then either. People are here from 3-4 in the morning.
Newsfirst inquired from Commander Chamira Ranavira, who is the coordinator to the Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jayanth Colombo. Commander Chamira Ranavira said that the ministry is situated in the Selangor Tower and an internal issue between its multiple owners has resulted in the power being disconnected to the ministry.
Meanwhile, the Social Democrats organization attempted to hand over a letter to the governor of the central bank, Ajit Cabral, at his residence demanding him to resign from his post. The main person responsible for the economic crisis in the country and the lack of foreign reserves is Ajit Cabral. When asked not to pay the $500 million in sovereign bonds, they've only deposited 200 or 250 million. The remainder of the 500 million has to be paid by their confidence. I think he took over the central bank to pay off that remainder under the pretext of paying the bonds. What they did was deposit in the bonds that benefit them. Please resign. That is our request. However, no one was at the central bank governor's official residence had accepted the letter demanding his resignation.
The export sector in Sri Lanka generates a majority of the foreign revenue earned by the country. Exporters claim that the Forex shortage has hindered their growth as a sector.
The apparel sector is on a journey for 2022 for exports of 6 billion, and in January we did the highest January ever. But the impact of the current issues in relation to power and in relation to fuel are now putting that at risk. Our ask is that we need a long-term solution, because the key in this is our reputation. Sri Lanka has always had a reputation for delivering in, and what the buyers will do is very simply just move orders away from Sri Lanka to other countries.
There are some factories don't have power or fuel to run their factories, and also they can't bring their produce or teas to Colombo for auctioning. Sometimes we have dollars to pay, sometimes there are delays, so we are losing that competitiveness because now certain things we cannot supply, or we cannot supply on time. This will have a long-term effect.
If the USA decides to sanction Russian fuel, which they are contemplating, the price will move up sharply, and those who have credible facilities with the suppliers will get their fuel. Now, if Sri Lanka doesn't have a plan of action, we will be facing severe consequences to this.
In some breaking news on the economic front in Sri Lanka, the central bank has devalued the rupee against the US dollar to 230 rupees. In a statement, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka said that Forex transactions would take place at levels which are not more than 230 rupees per US dollar. The central bank said the decision was made considering the severity of the external shocks and recent developments from the domestic front. Once again, in some breaking news, the central bank has devalued the rupee against the US dollar to 230 rupees. In a statement, the central bank said that the Forex transactions would take place at levels which are not more than 230 rupees per US dollar. The central bank stressed that the decision was made considering the severity of the external shocks and recent developments in the domestic front.
Sri Lanka's rate of inflation remains amongst the highest in the Asian region. In January this year, all-island inflation in the country rose to 16.8%. During the same month, India reported an inflation rate of 6.01%, Bangladesh 5.86%, Malaysia 2.3%, Vietnam 1.9%, Philippines 3%, Thailand 3.23%, and Indonesia 2.18%. A similar trend was observed in Sri Lanka's foreign reserves position that stood at $2.4 billion by the end of January this year. During this period, Bangladesh reported foreign revenues of $41.7 billion, Indonesia 141 billion, and Malaysia 116 billion. The stronger foreign reserve position of our regional peers is largely due to their strong export performance.
Colombo Additional Magistrate Chandimaliyanage today fixed the dates to take up the case filed against former Minister Vimal Veeravansa and 5 others. The case was filed over staging a protest obstructing the main road, disrupting public order and vehicular movement on the day the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights at the time, Prince Zaid Rad Al Hussein, visited Sri Lanka.
Cinnamon Gardens police filed the case against the 6 suspects for staging a protest causing disruptions to public order by obstructing vehicular movement on the 6th of February 2016 in line with the visit of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Zaid Rad Al Hussein. When the case was taken up today, Cinnamon Gardens police requested the court to provide another date to hear the case. Accordingly, the case will be heard on the 30th of May. They said that the power will not be disrupted. Even today, a plan has been put forward to disrupt electricity. On the other hand, the petrol crisis has arisen. These are happening because they didn't make calculated decisions. The finance minister is very much aware of the fate of the country. What he is attempting to do is drag the country into crisis and then make way for Western powers to come in and prey on our country. The Prime Minister had said that the minister had spread false rumours claiming that there will be a fuel shortage and that there is a reason for this crisis. Whether it was the Prime Minister or anyone else, it is a silly comment. I challenged him to completely resolve this fuel crisis if that is true. The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian Jagat Kumara today said that the government will face no issues even though Vimal Veeravangsha and Udaya Gammanpila were removed from their ministerial positions. The fact that they moved out of the government to remain independent or to join the opposition will not make much difference to the government. The government will move forward. We had a 2/3 majority in parliament. There is no requirement for a government to have a 2/3 majority all the time. A simple majority in the parliament would do the job. There are instances in the past where governments went on with just 113 seats in the House. Even though some members have crossed over to the opposition, we still have around 127 to 128 MPs in our side. Definitely it should be given. They are not our enemies. We don't want to put their lives in danger. We should protect them. It's true that they made a wrong choice, but they still have the opportunity to correct their decision and to join the government.
Venerable L.A. Gunawansathero convened a media briefing today alleging that land in Colombo is being sold to local and international companies.
The government always complains saying that there's a shortage of dollars in the country. Steps have also been taken to sell vital lands in the country to both local and foreign companies. What happened to the money obtained by these sales? A land has been sold for $1.2 billion for a development project. A land in Beddegama is sold for $1.7 billion to construct a bird park. Another land in Kappetipolomawatha in Colombo has also been sold for some billions. I took the initiative of cultivating organic plants in a land in Ekala that belongs to the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. It was I who obtained this land from the SLBC chairman on behalf of the war veterans who were injured from battle. The land has an extent of around 80 acres and I started these cultivations using my own money. We cultivated for up to 6 to 7 acres and today the Urban Development Authority has taken steps to sell this land as well. If we sell out our assets like this, we will face consequences as a nation. At the end, we are left with no other option but to take to the street with the people against these actions.
ජීවත් වෙන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. අපි ඉන්නේ දැඩි වේදනාවකින් අපි ජනතාවත් එක්ක පාරට බැහැලා අනාගතයේදී කටයුතු කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා අපිට.
In some news from overseas now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin and urged him to hold direct talks with President Zelensky of Ukraine, in addition to the ongoing negotiation between their teams. The two leaders discussed evolving situation in Ukraine in a phone call that lasted about 50 minutes.
Oil prices have soared to the highest level since July 2008 after the US said it was discussing a potential ban on Russian supplies with other countries. Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, rose above $139 a barrel before easing to around $130. Gold has risen to more than $2,000 in Asian trade as investors flee to the safe haven commodity over fears about the effect of the Ukraine war on the global economy.
Russia said it has now opened routes for the Ukrainians to leave the country if necessary. Now, they have called for a ceasefire and decided to make a safe passage for the Ukrainians to leave the country on humanitarian grounds.
In a phone conversation with Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Sunday, Russian President Vladimir Putin assured his Turkish counterpart that the operation has been proceeding as planned and scheduled. Meanwhile, Moscow has declined to send a delegation to the UN's top court for a hearing into Ukraine's request for its judges to order Russia to halt its invasion. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine will not forgive Russia for all the casualties and sufferings the war it started had caused, accusing Russian forces of targeting civilians.
We will not forgive the shelled houses. We will not forgive the missiles that our air defense shot down today at Okhmedet and the even more than 500 other such missiles that hit our land in the Ukraine, our people, our children.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China's Red Cross will provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine as he reiterated a call for diplomatic talks to continue. He stressed China's friendship with Russia are rock solid and the prospects for cooperation are very broad. Yi's words come hours after Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison urged China to denounce Russia. In a lengthy foreign policy speech in Sydney, Morrison said China had repeatedly spoken about respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Morrison said it's up to China at this hinge point of history to demonstrate these are more than just words, as no country would have a greater impact on Russia than China. Until now, China's government has neither condemned nor cordoned Russia's war on Ukraine and has even refrained from calling it an invasion in the first place. Meanwhile, on 1st March, the heads of 22 foreign missions to Islamabad, including those of EU member nations, issued a joint letter requesting Pakistan to back a UN General Assembly resolution denouncing Russia's special operation in Ukraine. In response, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan had slammed Western envoys visiting his country's capital Islamabad, who called on Pakistan to denounce Russia's special military operation in Ukraine last week, asking if they thought Pakistan was their slave.
The best view comes after the hardest climb. In line with International Women's Day, 12 women took on a challenge as they tried out the sport of rock climbing for the very first time.
The sport of climbing is today one of the fastest growing sporting activities in the world. Both outdoor and indoor climbing has attracted enthusiasts because of its unique combination of being quite challenging and providing a complete workout. A workshop on rock climbing was conducted at the Kodigahakanda Sanctuary yesterday. The climbing site is located about 5 minutes into the Kodigahakanda Sanctuary. Sachit from Climb Lanka, the outfit that manages the rock climbing site, also joined the workshop. Jayant Kurutumpala, the first Sri Lankan to summit Mount Everest in 2016, led the workshop yesterday. Jayanti, we are doing this in line with the International Women's Day, and rock climbing is rather an unusual sport for a woman, and it's difficult to understand the thinking behind why you wanted a group of women to pursue something like rock climbing. What is the message here?
Well, actually, rock climbing is, first of all, I have to say it is an Olympic sport, and it is a sport that there is a small community, that it's a sport that I am passionate about, and I love this sport. And it's a simple reason of trying to share this sport with others. But we did organize 2 women's only rock climbing workshops for women and girls, particularly because we wanted to create a space where women can come here with their daughters, with their nieces, or even just we had a baby who was 3 years old climbing, and be in a space where they can be free with their bodies, where they can move their bodies without restricting themselves. We wanted to create a space that was non-judgmental, non-competitive, a space where we would cheer each one on, and that's the kind of space we have had today, where girls from all age groups, all sizes, all skin colors have come today.
12 participants from different walks of life attended the workshop. Few of them engaged in this sport for the very first time.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News on TV1 for tonight. I'm Charlotte Benedict for the News First team, along with our sign language interpreter for tonight, Taraka Gabriel. Take care and God bless.